Okay. Got a couple of things we're going to be covering today. Negotiating project agreements and empowering team members and stakeholders. My name's Harry Dosher. I was the one that you got stuck with for Monday's session too. So we'll also be together this coming Monday for the third part of this. Okay, so lesson objectives by topic are to determine a negotiation strategy and negotiate project agreements, and organize around team strengths and support team task accountability. And again, what we're talking about tonight is necessary for you to understand. It's not sufficient for you to understand just this. You need to be digging into these ECO areas. You need to be reading the Agile manual from PMI and doing supplemental reading either from the web through either one of the study books like Mulcahy or Crow, and doing your best to completely understand what we're talking about here. Okay. So the enablers to negotiating project agreements are: analyze the bounds of the negotiation for agreement. So it's really just determine what the agreement covers. If it's for building a road, it may not need to cover things such as signs along the road or something like that. But you just need to understand what you're going to be negotiating about, and assess priorities and determine the ultimate objectives. So sometimes you'll get an objective or what looks like an objective that's very abstract or nebulous in nature. And what you'll need to do is fully understand what the priorities are and really understand, at least internally, what the objectives are for this negotiation. It doesn't mean that you need to go, you need to reveal this information to the party that you're negotiating with by any means. But you really need to know what the goals of the corporation are, so that when you enter into the negotiations, you can be sure that you're not either giving something away or not concentrating enough on what's going to benefit the corporation the most. The other next enabler is verify objectives of the agreement, that the objectives of the agreement are met. That's ongoing, that occurs after the agreement's been made, and it's really monitoring it and doing an initial assessment after the negotiations and make sure that you've covered everything. Also, determine a negotiation strategy. There are, in a corporation the size of AT&T, there are people who do nothing but negotiations. If you end up working with a different company, or if you're on your own, the negotiation strategy may vary from, you'd be more involved with it, and may vary from vendor to vendor or customer to customer. And there are a lot of ways that you can negotiate. It's about the same as buying a car or someone buying a house, where you need to know what your priorities are. You need to know what the limits are. Are you going to be looking for something that, say, a house that has a pool? Are you looking for a house with central air? Something like that. Okay. And what you need to do is determine exactly how you're going to go into the negotiation. is one of your strategies to, if you're not getting enough of your desires met, packing up and leaving. And I worked at a different corporation. I was involved with negotiating contracts, corporate level contracts for software packages. And the attorney I worked with always used the same negotiation tactic and strategy, that if we weren't getting close to what we needed going in, after negotiations were underway, he'd just take his papers, put them all together, stack them up, put them in his briefcase, and just announce it. We're done for today. We don't. I don't know if we're going to be able to reach an agreement on this. I need to talk with my leadership, and if we can go forward, I'll let you know. And would walk out. 9 out of 10 times, the other party would end up calling us back immediately, because it was a fairly large corporation. These were good contracts to have for the vendors. So there are other strategies too. There are a lot of, at least there used to be, you could go out to the web and look up negotiation strategies, and you can get all kinds of courses on them. Okay, and then the last enabler they list is participate in agreement negotiations. So once you have your strategy established, you may be asked or required to be part of the negotiations, usually not taking a lead role, being there to supplement what the other teams, other members of your team are doing. Okay, we talked about deliverables and tools. The deliverables is a service level agreement. Probably heard of SLAs. We have service level agreements between, say, our operating companies and IT to make sure that any of the features are working properly, things like that. Service level agreement will define what the turnaround time is, how you treat each priority, defects, things like that. Also have a performance report, and this is something that goes up through leadership. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Resource calendars, where you have the availability of people, the availability of equipment. You lay it out on a calendar basis. Excuse me. And just to make sure that things dovetail properly. When you have the people, that you have the necessary material. When you have the material, you have the necessary people. It also lists things like holidays. If you're using a third party or an offshore party, you need to incorporate their holiday schedule into that too. I know AT&T does a lot of business, especially software-wise, with corporations in India and other places around the world, where the holiday schedule is definitely not the same as U.S. holidays. So just be aware of that and make sure that you include that. When I talk about go live blackouts, there's a section on this coming up too, but it's basically a freeze on whatever you're delivering so that it can be finally tested and then incorporated into production. Tools that you're going to be using are negotiation skills, and we've talked a little bit about that already tonight. Expert judgment, and this again can be internal to the team.
Excuse me, Harry.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt. I think the starting the project 2 is the PowerPoint that we're on, and it's the PowerPoint that is listed under our, I guess, timeline, reviewing the budget and resources plan.
Oh, okay.
I think we've already
All right.
done this PowerPoint. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean,
What?
does anyone else?
Okay, let me take a look here.
Yeah, no, you're correct. I was wondering that too. We should be on plan and manage
Great.
budget and resources. Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
I agree.
Sorry, I was trying to say something earlier, but I didn't realize I was double muted. Sorry to let you get that far.
No, that's okay. It's a good warm up. Which okay. At least you didn't let me get all the way to the end. Let's see. Huh. Well, we may have a problem with the slides here.
It looks like they're on like our wiki where it says the order that we go in, and the PowerPoint and the class plan is attached, and they post the recordings where the recordings are posted as well.
Ah. So we're supposed to be on plan and manage budget and resources.
Yeah,
That's
starting the project part 2
Okay.
is the.
Yeah. We've got some bad numbering on some of these. So we'll get that corrected and should be set. So. That look better?
Yes, it looks much better. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for letting me know on this. So we're going to retrench here, and we're going to talk about starting the project. So we'll talk about plan and manage budget and resources, and plan and manage the schedule. The ECO tasks are listed. So we're going to talk about plan and manage the budget and resources, and plan, prepare, modify, and manage project schedule based on the methodology. And this will vary. Depending on whether we're, say, a waterfall or an agile project. So the enablers are estimate budgetary needs, anticipate future budget challenges, monitor budget variations and work with governance process, and then plan and manage resources. And again, resources are both people and material, and will vary depending on the type of project that you're managing, whether it's, say, a software creation project, or it's, say, building a building or a road, remodeling something, okay? So that all kinds of different resources can be involved here. Okay. The deliverables and tools, again, we have a cost baseline where we have estimated what we figure that the overall project is going to cost. And these estimates can be made based on previous projects, can be based on industry standards, or they can be, as in most software projects, a wet-fingered guess. Hold on. Come on. All right. Resource management plan, so that all of the resources are managed properly. We have a management reserve, which let me check one thing here. Yep. Okay. Management reserve is, you can think of it as kind of a slush fund that is held back so that if there are any small changes, things like that, you don't have to go back through and get authorization, financial authorization again. Change requests, this will differ very much between predictive projects and agile projects. Change requests in agile projects are usually able to be accommodated by reprioritizing the backlog. If it's something significant that's going to take, cost a significant amount of money, you may need to go back and get some more money for the project. Should have cost forecasts and risk analysis. You have to, with the cost forecasts, take a look based on industry standards. Perhaps take a look at what it should be costing for the entire length of the project. Okay. Tools we'll use are estimating techniques. There's 3-point, analogous, parametric, t-shirt sizing, planning, poker. And these are all different ways of a team doing estimates. 3-point is optimistic, pessimistic, and most likely. And based on the confidence of the estimators, you can weight what the responses are. Analogous is comparing it to another project of the same type that's already been completed, and you use that as a reference. Take into account any of the changes between the completed project and your project, as far as what deliverables are, and you can adjust your estimates accordingly. Parametric is basically taking a look at the what has to be estimated and using various parameters to come up with a final estimate. T-shirt sizing is just really putting the whatever the effort is into a bucket, from like extra small to double extra large. That's all. That's why they call it t-shirt sizing. Planning poker uses a, believe it or not, a modified Fibonacci sequence, and the team independently estimates what the effort is for each of the portions of the project. You can use it for individual tasks. You can use it for overall the overall project. You can also use it for anything in between. You'll also need to review the organizational data, what the resources are, what what it takes to get additional resources or additional funding, things like that. You'll have more meetings than you ever care to have. Talking with customers, also talking with the delivery teams, and working with both to come up with an acceptable schedule and acceptable deliveries. Okay. Understanding change control, so that if it's a predictive project, you have to understand the formal change control system. With an agile project, you need to see when a formal process needs to be enacted, and what the parameters are if you need to make a small change. Okay. Use velocity data and analysis. We're talking about how much can be accomplished within a given time box. The velocity of a team is usually expressed in story points, where each team has a consistent sprint that they're using. Ideally, it'd be 2 weeks. So you're looking at velocity for the 2-week period. And you're also looking at the velocity for something that in the SAFe paradigm is called a program increment, which is a collection of 5 to 6 individual sprints. Okay, so they're just additive. You'll see things like burn up charts or burn down charts to show how much has been accomplished over a period of time. And you can calculate the velocity just based on what they've done historically, and then taking a look at what needs to still be done. Throughput analysis. If you've got a project that requires a lot of data movement or a lot of people movement or anything like that, you need to understand where any bottlenecks might occur. And you've got cost variance, earned value, especially is helpful in determining what the variance is at any point in time along the project. And then features accepted versus features remaining. That again is burn down, burn up charts. Give you a good handle on that. Talk about each one of these a little bit more. So cost estimates, what you're doing is really developing an approximation of the cost for each activity in the project. They list things that should be included within the cost estimate, things like direct labor, materials, equipment. What we're talking about here is direct labor is both employees and contractors. Materials being whatever is needed to complete the project, whether if it's a software project, what we're talking about are the whatever computing platforms you need, whether it's cloud-based, whether it's standalone. However, we have to do that, the development systems, things like that. Equipment that also, if you're, say, building a road, do you need a crane at certain times? Do you need the big concrete or asphalt paving machines that they have, where you can do a couple of lanes at a time? Do you need to house people in a particular location? Do you need to co-locate your team? Or can they all work independently and remote? So that'll determine what you need to spend as far as facilities. Services, we're talking about either subcontractors providing things, or in this case too, that if there's something that needs to be done by a third party that doesn't result in a physical delivery of something. And then also information technology, whatever software is involved with it. We talked about this before, the management reserve or contingency reserves. That's basically the slush fund in case the estimates are off, or something catastrophic hits like COVID-19, where you can't do business the same way that you have been, and you're going to have some cost associated with doing business differently. And then any indirect costs, if some materials increase in price, things like that. Okay. So what you really want to do is make a good logical estimate. And those estimates provide the basis for making sound decisions, and they establish baselines. So you want to go into the project and establish your cost baseline, taking everything like this into consideration. And then, the same as we want to do with everything, especially with an agile project, you want to assess how accurate your estimates were. You want to assess how far along the development curve you are, what remains, and run it up against the total number of, say, feature points or story points that you have in your backlog to deliver the overall project. Okay, advantages and disadvantages of estimating techniques. We list 3 techniques: analogous estimating, bottom-up estimating, parametric estimating. So analogous estimating, the advantage is that it can ensure no work is inadvertently omitted from work estimates. If you've got the same project, same type of project especially, and you're just doing it for 100th time instead of the 99th, you should have a pretty good handle on what the costs are going to be. Disadvantages that can sometimes be difficult for lower level managers to apportion cost estimates. So breaking the overall costs down sometimes takes an expert or someone with experience in the overall work effort. Bottom-up estimating is having the delivery teams begin the estimates, give an idea of what it's going to take them to develop things, and then you have to add into that integration, testing, things like that. Now, bottom-up estimating is very accurate and gives lower-level managers more responsibility. You're putting the estimating process closest to where it's going to be used. And the disadvantages can be very time-consuming, and it can only be used after the work breakdown structure has been well-defined. So you need to know how you're breaking up the project, how many teams you will have, whether they're using predictive methods, whether they're using agile methods. You need to know a lot more about the project before you can get a good, accurate bottom-up estimate. Now, parametric estimating, the advantage is it's not time-consuming, but the disadvantage is it may be inaccurate depending on the integrity of the historical information that you use to do the estimates. If the closest similar project that you have is 10 years old, you may have some information that's valuable, and there usually is some information that's just totally obsolete. So you need to be aware of that. So what we have are some variables here where you want to know how accurate you want the estimates to be. So they have three types: definitive estimates, rough order of magnitude, and phased estimates. So the accuracy of, say, something like a definitive estimate would be in the -5 to +10% accuracy. Rough order of magnitude is going to run between, say, -25% to +75%. And it just gives you an idea of what it could cost. Phased estimates would be done at each significant milestone of the project, and the accuracy would be higher. We have to worry about project governance, and this is really oversight of the project, how the money's being spent, how the time's being spent. Governance as applied to cost estimates is managing project phases. Different type of cost estimate and level of accuracy may be required for different phases of the project life cycle. Especially if you've got a third party that you're shipping something out to or expecting something from, you need to know when deliverables need to be ready, either to go to the vendor or coming from the vendor. Okay. On the other hand, you may have some deliverables that can be delayed, and you don't have to be all that accurate on the cost estimating because it's all done in-house, and it's perhaps a fixed bid. The reasons you might choose different methods are software availability, team member experience. So if your whole team's been going through and doing estimates using one type of estimating, and they're comfortable with it, you may want to run with that way for estimating. The project life cycle phase that you're in, as I said, if there is some reason why you don't have to be as accurate, then I wouldn't try to make the numbers anything other than what they come up as. I mean, if you're, sometimes the just a -25 +75% estimate is good enough, depending on the life cycle phase. Then any time constraints that you have. I know we never have time constraints. Where you have just a limited period of time to produce an estimate, and one that takes a number of weeks is usually not acceptable at that point. You need something that you can put together pretty quickly. Project definition, what type of project you're actually doing, and how you plan on doing it. And then good old personal preference, so that if you have say experience in one method and you want your team to be doing that, your vote is probably your team vote +1. So that if there's a need to do it in one way and you have a personal preference for that, you can, as a project manager, either insist upon it or should be able to negotiate with the team to try and let them understand why you want to go with that particular technique. And our lessons learned register. I know we always document lessons learned, and I have seen some teams actually go back and take a look at previous logs, not wanting to experience the same thing, the same setbacks. Okay, so lessons learned in early project work can be applied to later project work. So if you're dealing with a vendor and have some experience with them early on in the project, and say they overperform and deliver early, you can apply that knowledge, document that, and then later on in the project, know that you have a pretty good idea that they may be delivering early again. And experience from previous projects is an important component in budgeting. So again, we're taking a look at what happened previously and using that as a basis for making estimates for that particular project that you're working on. And then lessons learned registers contain valuable cost estimating information for both successes and shortcomings. So you should be documenting this all the way through the development process. Some guidelines to estimate costs. Gather cost figures that go into the cost estimates for individual work packages. Check with the resource supplier to make sure no incorrect assumptions have been made. And really, whenever you can, change, go talk with either the customer or the vendor to make sure that any assumptions that you've made are accurate. To me, the worst thing is if you're putting together estimates or going into negotiations is assuming anything. It's always better to get the facts. To me, an assumption is a red flag, that you don't have accurate information there, that you really need to talk with some people to get your questions answered and to change an assumption to a fact. Okay. And gather any relevant input information that may help you prepare the estimates, determining what estimating technique to use. And remember, we went over a number of them, all the way from planning poker to analogous estimating. Looking for alternative costing options. You really want to make sure that you keep the integrity of the project in mind if you're looking at changing costing or seeing if you can eliminate something. Just have to look at all the parameters. And then determine the units of measure that will be used. Literally, there have been projects, NASA projects, where everything that NASA had been doing was done metric systems, so bolts and dimensions, everything was metric. And they have had vendors who have used the SAE measurements, so that they were using 3/4 inch bolts and 12-inch pieces of metal instead of what the equivalent would be in the metric system. So this really needs to be understood by all the parties who are going to be contributing to the project. And it sounds like, why wouldn't you? The one time that you don't, it's going to bite you. Consider possible risks that may impact costs. If you're doing something like building a road, really you need to factor in the possibility of rain delays, things like that, into your schedule. Anymore these days, projects that have been done in the last, say, 18 months had to consider the impacts of COVID-19. Okay. And ensure that all cost estimates are assigned to the appropriate account. This is the bookkeeping. Depends on how your books are broken out. As to what type of accounting mechanism you use, so that in a small outfit, you may end up just having one cost account for a project. With like AT&T, you may have multiple PIDs all coming together for an overall project. So just be aware of that. And then make sure estimates include costs for resources, level of estimate, and a list of assumptions. And try to eliminate all the assumptions that you can. I don't have any activities. So let's talk about budget estimates. So estimating the project budget consists of aggregating the estimated costs of individual activities or work packages to establish an authorized cost baseline. Basically, it's add everything up, add all your initial estimates up, and use that as your baseline. The budget that you put together contains all the funding needed to complete the project as defined in the scope baseline and the project schedule. Now, this is true for both predictive and agile projects. There are some agile-based projects that may be funded in a different way, and we've been pushing at the Agile COE the use of that thought left me. Funding by value stream, where a certain number of people are funded for a period of time, usually a year, and then work is brought to them. And the project cost performance is then measured against this cost baseline. So you want to, once you establish the baseline, that's your estimate, and all along significant milestones in the project life, you can take a look and see how you're performing based on the baseline estimates. Okay, cost baseline definition is the approved version of the time-phased project budget, excluding any management reserves, which can be changed only through formal change control procedures, and is used as a basis for comparison to actual results. This is a time-phased budget, so that funding is available based on the estimates for that for the costs at any one time. And it also monitors and measures cost performance. You always compare against the baseline, see how you are today, whether you're ahead of the game or whether you're behind. And the baseline usually includes a budget contingency. And again, that's the slush fund, where you have a reserve and to be used if there are significant variances caused by outside parameters. And this is going to vary from project to project. In the PMP guide, you've got a reference here. where you can find this, where you have your cost baseline. It's the initially what you've been allocated here, and then going up for some period of time. And what we're looking at here is what you need as far as funding is concerned, and it doesn't necessarily exactly follow what the baseline is. As you can see here, there are additional and sooner requirements. You can take a look at it on an analog basis rather than just a digital basis. Okay. All right, guidelines for estimating the cost baseline. So what you need to do is gather the inputs you'll need to establish the baseline, such as the work breakdown structure, project schedule, cost estimates, and then the risk management plan. Use the project schedule to determine when activities are going to take place. In some agile efforts, you'll be doing that more frequently than with either a single effort here, or the that thought left me too. Sorry. Okay, use the project schedule to determine when activities will take place. This is mostly with a predictive type project. With the agile implementation, the team may end up changing priorities, when things are going to be done, when things are going to be delivered, based on their say their burn down for the previous iteration, and also just the amount of knowledge that they have on that particular phase of the project. So the schedules may change. Then use one of the methods for assigning costs to allocate funds for each activity or work package for the time period when it's going to take place. So don't pay up front, pay when it's either being worked on or it's already completed. Consider adding a contingency reserve to accommodate the risk of incurring extra expenses. We've been talking about that so that it is some cost to carry that much around or through the whole project, but can be a real time saver. And then avoid adding contingency reserves for small one-time projects. Okay. If you've got something that's going to take a week or even a month to implement, having a contingency fund for that or a contingency reserve is really overkill because you don't have that much on the line. Now, if you have instead of that, the project if you've got a larger project, you would want to have the contingency reserve, but for small ones, it's not really recommended. Okay. Then take a look and total the costs for each time period that you have, whether it's by iteration, whether it's by milestone, whether it's by program increment. And then plot the costs for each period on the chart to create an S-curve of the baseline, and publish and distribute the cost baseline to the appropriate project stakeholders, usually leadership and finance. So we've got the project budgeting components here. So total amount of project budget, we've got management reserve, code baseline, control accounts, contingency reserve with work package cost estimates, and activity cost estimates for contingency reserve. And some of the challenges with budgeting. Ideally, budget is set during the project planning and doesn't change. That may or not be possible, especially with an agile project where you haven't done the detail estimates until you get to that point. So it is more common with predictive projects where you have a very strict, robust change control process already in place. Projects do not exist in a perfect world, and the following can pose a challenge to the project manager. Newer change project requirements, new risks or changes to the probabilities or impacts from existing risks, and changes to cost estimates resulting from economic factors, procurement, control modifications, resource costs, etc. When any of these things occur, one or more of the following must change. Either if we have newer change requirements, new risks, or okay. One key thing that you need to remember is if the budget remains fixed and additional funds are not available, then the project has to change. I mean, you can't get can't do the same, what you expected to do if you don't have the budget or the time to do it right. Okay, funding limit reconciliation is what we'll talk about now. The definition is the process of comparing the planned expenditure project funds against any limits on the commitment of funds for the project to identify any variances between the funding limits and the planned expenditures. So most budgets assume steady incoming and outgoing flows. Depending on the type of project and when you're doing it, you may have more flowing into the project than flowing out, or vice versa. But just be aware if there are any discrepancies that could invalidate your estimates for your budgets. Large sporadic expenditures are usually incompatible with organizational operations. What you want to be able to do is wisely spend your budget and not just hand it over to one particular party, especially. Funding limits help regulate the outgoing capital flow, and they protect against overspending, so that you have the total amount of funding that can be requested by certain levels, like a captain would be able to request more than or less than a major would, and just those ranks, or an associate director can only request a certain amount. You need a director or an AVP to okay it. and I was with another company, and I have little or none on the budget responsibility here at AT&T, but at the other company, I had a capital budget of around $500,000 that I didn't need any more financial approval on expenditures from that budget. So it depends. It's going to vary from company to company. So I have some guidelines to anticipate future budget challenges. We're going to keep the stakeholder register current and be aware of changes to project requirements if new stakeholders are added to the project. Especially, you'll see this happen too within leadership. If there are changes, things may need to, the outputs for the project may need to change too. And then monitor risks frequently to look for new risks and changes to existing ones, and take a look and see how the team has worked with those risks and any of the ones that they've completely mitigated. And you also want to monitor the performance of suppliers and vendors. It should be written into the agreement that exactly how they're supposed to be reporting back about really anything, the progress and the budget both. But really make sure that that's part of the negotiations, where you define what they're going to be reporting, how often they're going to be reporting about it, the medium that they're going to be using, whether it's email, whether it's a document, whether it's, everything's put on a jump drive and sent to you, exactly how you need to get it and what they need to show you. Then monitor all changes to the project and follow the change management system to try to keep them within budget. Again, the formal change management system, you may or may not have that available, depending on the type of project and depending on the company that you're working with. Okay. So guidelines to determine a budget. First is review the cost management plan, review the human resources management plan, and review the scope baseline for project scope statement, work breakdown structure, and WBS dictionary. Okay. Check the project schedule for type, quantity, and duration of resources, both people and equipment, material, machinery, anything like that. Review the risk register to consider any risks that may have already impacted cost estimation. Review the EEFs and OPAs. Use appropriate tools and techniques. It's both in the operation of the team, and the team's trying to produce something. And again, this is any of the leads for the teams need to be aware of what these numbers are, and be able to go into negotiations with leadership and and document the project budget, creating a cost baseline. We talked enough about that. Understand project funding requirements or cash flow to enable the project. You may or may not have that requirement in a larger corporation. You may have a team that works just on those things. But as far as PMI is concerned, remember these guidelines, and then update project documents as needed. And which one we're going to always update? Okay. And then update project documents as needed. We always have that one. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have any of the activities, but let's see. All right. So, learning goals that we had today were to assess project needs, complexity, and magnitude, to determine the appropriate project methodology or methods and practices, plan and manage the scope, plan and manage the budget and resources, plan, prepare, modify, and manage the project schedule based on methodology, plan and manage the quality of products and deliverables, integrate project management, project planning activities, plan and manage procurement strategy, establish the project governance schedule, structure, and plan and manage project or phase closure. Okay. And that's what we have to cover today. Questions that we have are, why do you think developing project and scope management plans is important? You think about that. They even write down an answer. And why do you think it's important to collect requirements, define scope, and create a work breakdown structure? So if you want to think about those overnight, if you want to, well, until next Monday, and then we can talk about anything you want regarding that. Any questions I can answer?
The only one I have is we went over the different types of estimating. Is there one in our company that we use more often than any other?
No. It depends on the organization. It depends on, the exactly what you're estimating. It depends on the experience of the people doing the estimating. So any of the ones that were mentioned, I've seen used within AT&T.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
So
Okay.
I've never had to manage a budget, but that slush fund that you were talking about, is it a percentage of the overall budget for the project, or is it a set dollar amount? Like, have you seen that?
I've seen both.
Oh, okay. Does the
Okay,
project manager really decide?
Say again, please.
Does the project manager decide the size of that slush fund, or is it
Usually not. Usually not. Project manager can recommend what the size needs to be, and then finance and leadership need to determine whether or not that's possible, if the funding is available, or exactly how we would handle something like that. If there was a catastrophe, or we had an estimate that was so far off that it's going to cost a bunch more to implement.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, along those lines too, if you had a project that had an overall estimate of, $50,000 to implement, which is basically nothing, rather than take a percentage, which might be like 0.1%, you may want to just put in a fixed number that would be more than, like, let's say the 0.1%. Okay, just to cover your bases. You know, if you're, it's like tipping, where if you're in a restaurant, you buy something, and it comes up to like $5, or you go out to dinner and the bill's say $100. $100, you take a certain percentage, and it works out really well. But if it's like $5 and you're tipping 10%, that's 50 cents. You may want to have like a fixed amount rather than a percentage that you can work with there. Being able to say leave at least $1.
I've never gotten that luxury at AT&T with a budget, but I get it.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know. Yeah. See, that's the whole thing. It's something that you really, really, really have to keep in mind is that PMI is talking about many, many, many different industries and many corporations around the world in multiple countries. And it is really documenting and prescribing what they consider to be best in class ways of managing projects. So if AT&T does something different than that, that's up to AT&T to make that conscious decision. That PMI is going to be telling you what they recommend as basically an ideal project, how to manage a project in an ideal manner. So always go with the result or the answer that you would see in either the PMBOK guide, the Agile guide, or in some of the exercises or lectures that you get. Don't ever base it on your AT&T experience.
That's true. I've gotten them all wrong when I base it on my AT&T experience.
I don't doubt that one bit. Well, AT&T's doesn't run projects the way 100% the way PMI says to run projects. So I can see where you could have that problem very easily. So you really need to change your mindset and do the estimates, do everything, answer the questions for the test based on many industries across the world.
Agreed. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else? Okay. Looks like people want to get out of here. We covered everything and then some. And Monday we'll hit part 3. Okay. If you have any other questions, you can always, when you aren't able to reach your mentor or another person, always feel free to contact me on Microsoft Teams or email. And my ATTU ID is H as in hotel, D as in Delta, 5874. I'll try and get an answer for you.
Thanks, Harry.
Thank
Sure.
you. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Harry.
You too.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.